Why is everyone talking about AI agents all of a sudden? Is this the next phase of artificial intelligence or another overhyped technology that will cause companies to spend lots and lots of money on? We're going to separate the reality from the hype on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is Michael Cohen. He is the Global Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Plus Company. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thanks.
How's your new year going for you?
Oh, it was off like a shotgun start.
All right.
January 2nd.
So we've talked a lot on the show about agentic AI agents, all of this next phase of AI. But what I want to do is take a quick step back, and from your perspective, as you've seen the industry evolve, talk about this evolution, from the early days to where we are now, because I think that's an important point that a lot of people don't realize is that we are evolving this technology, correct?
For sure. And I think I've had a unique sort of period of time in which, my career has evolved in the area of prediction fundamentally. That's what all of this AI is based on, prediction and prediction machines.
Yep.
So, from the period when cloud computing and I was talking to somebody the other day about the dude, you're getting a Dell era, right? And well, if you remember something about those marketing communications, they talked a lot about the new Intel processor and how it was quickly evolving, and you'd go from one quarter to the next and they'd be selling a new machine with a faster processor, and everything was
right,
following this law of more transistors and increased computation and stuff like that. And it was at that time when people could start to use more sophisticated prediction ideas on these personal computers. And that's when I started as well. So that was sort of the beginning, I'd say, around 2000 when this whole thing really kicked off in a big way.
Okay. But since then, you've also witnessed, the early days of generative AI. And, is it fair to say that we're in a fundamental shift here to the next phase?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of fundamental shifts. Certainly, if we think from a hardware perspective, when people started using these graphic processing units to do complex mathematical operations. So fundamentally, when you're determining the weights in any of these models, you have to do what's called the matrix inversion. And what NVIDIA figured out is that, the distributed computing that was available in a graphics processing unit with their CUDA language could allow you to scale that and train much bigger models, especially as the computation caught up. So that was like 2005, 2006.
Okay.
That unlocked an era of more like scientific development, right? That went on for another 10 or 12 years before we saw the latest sort of unlock in building something that was at a scale that produced a user experience at a speed that really allowed everybody to adopt some form of this.
Right. And then that's what you're talking about in 2022 at the end of the year with the, ChatGPT and some of those other image models that came out too, right? Like I think that's what was impressing a lot of people from the end user side of like, oh, wow, this is super fast and it's relatively useful at the time of something that could be used, in many different things, right?
Yeah, and the language aspect of it, right?
Right.
Language is something we all use versus math isn't something that everybody uses. So making that leap in, the generative pre-trained transformer research out of Google in, this 2017 period, you have a 5-year period where people are unlocking a user experience that allows you to get to this 2022 release of ChatGPT that really speaks to everybody.
Right. Hey, do you feel like we've had an exponential growth since then? Like from we start talking 23, 24, and now we're into 2025. Like because of the success, now we're seeing this. Because I wrote down in our notes before the show, like we were talking about 50-50 training and inference, where most of the work that was being done was training these models, and now we're moving towards an inference model. Can you explain like a little bit about that?
Well, there's a question about if you look at compute and which what that's being applied to.
Yeah.
The focus and the scale up has been around training bigger and more sophisticated models with more parameters. But as use grows, use actually is taking those models and applying them for direct interaction, which is like the inference piece. And new dimensions of scaling are larger applications of the inference piece. So you might have heard about this, taking extra time to compute to be able to come up with higher quality answers, so test time, compute sort of thing.
Right.
That's like chained inference. Like you're allowing it to think more, and the thinking is like the inference phase. So as we see scale in that dimension, that's just one dimension that these things will scale up in sophistication and use. You'll see more of that inference piece. That's the sort of thing that could balance out against training, or allow us to use some of the existing data centers and hardware to do that kind of stuff. At the same time, outfitting hardware that's at the edge on our devices with capabilities to do that, the inference right there in the vehicle, on the phone, in the computer is important to performance of real-time interaction with AI.
Yeah, from what I was hearing about the I think I've heard them called reasoning models. That that's why it's going to take a little bit of extra time to get the answer, because it's thinking more, and it's because the questions that are being asked are requiring more quote unquote thinking than maybe some of the early questions where it was like. It was almost like a search engine, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And now you want the answer to be more human-like, I guess, without getting, into the hype part of it.
A better answer.
Yeah.
It's not different than people. You give people time to think about the answer to something. You give them more time and they'll come up with a better answer. The same thing is happening here, where it's validating that answer. So when it comes back, you're like, oh, that's the answer I want, rather than just, the answer that it'll give you if you want to immediate response,
or the answers based on data of whatever was on the internet when it was training, right? Like,
yes,
yeah,
which is I think something that we'll get into. You start with this: let's take all the data, suck it all up, and start training these models. And now training includes more of inference during training that actually synthesizes data that allows it to verify the answers more when you go up in scale or allow it to go more. So you're combining these steps to get better output.
So when we talk about AI agents, and this is being touted as the next phase, or this is the thing that most people are going to be focused on in 2025 or even 2026, why are we hearing about this now? Is it because that's the way that these models were developed, or did someone was there just like a person at Gartner who would just be like, aha, I know what the next thing's going to be, and it's going to be agents, and then everyone just kind of jumped on that bandwagon? Like, what is the industry talking about how we went from just the generative AI and the ChatGPT world into getting these tools that will now talk to other agents and do things for us rather than just giving us a single answer?
It's a pretty natural progression of how the product managers and product strategists were thinking, from the point of starting with a ChatGPT. All right, you can give it general questions, it'll give you general answers, but what if you add this idea of retrieval augmented generation, where you're setting up with a little bit more structure to give more precise or context dependent answers? And then from there, it's like, well, how do I scale up that idea? I can have a bunch of these things, and they can be good at different things, and division and specialization and making these things work together produces an even better experience, or one that's more natural, where you have a user that's directing and configuring these things to solve very specific problems of their own.
Do you feel like that this is going to be successful for a lot of these companies that are doing this, or do you think that this is just the company's like, well, we've got to come up with another idea to keep the investors interested, or keep the media attention on us? Because again, I haven't really seen any great examples yet that have succeeded in this agentic space, but it could be we're too early too.
You could look this week and start to see them. I mean, so just to give you my own sort of bias on it, I started in my own business developing an agentic architecture about 11, 12 months ago, and working specifically with AWS in their both alpha and beta programs around agentic architectures in their cloud. And the use cases there were oriented towards a combination of analyzing data and summarizing it in plain language, right? You can imagine that you can increase access to the sort of insight or information that's in data if you get fundamentally 2 or 3 agents working together, one that takes the request in plain language of a user, turns that into a data query, does the data query, analyzes that data, and then provides a brief for a user, again, in plain language. Each of those steps requires a different configured agent, if you will, and produces an answer that's particularly effective. So I think you've started to hear more about these cases where the AIs can analyze data and then produce plain language briefs and then turn that into imagery, and it grows from there. But those are available now.
Is it more of you're actually using it to get business purposes done, and maybe that's not as exciting as some of the consumer examples, especially with some of the amazing wow factor that you saw with the first generation of the ChatGPT stuff, and now we're actually going to use it to be productive, and that just doesn't seem as exciting sometimes to some people.
Yeah, I think there's often more risk when you have a customer facing or end customer facing technology versus what you experiment with as a business user, where you are more intervening in any sort of judgment that allows the things that it does to actually go into play versus having some sort of setup like this in a call center. That's where I'm starting to see early applications of this that are successful, where it's like an audio interface, but of course it's looking at a consumer record. It's taking data from that's collected during the initial part of the call. It's taking signals in the voice, and then there's an automated sort of response. That stuff is coming on pretty quickly. But yeah, I think there's been less risk because there's so much more management around actually using the stuff versus setting it free on hundreds of millions of customers.
I'm always in favor of just setting it free, and just because it just makes for interesting stories when something goes horribly wrong, because that's more fun to talk about than like, a headline that would say, computer program works. like that's not that exciting. It's more about computer outage, takes out 10 customers. All right. When we were also talking before the show, I think we brought up the idea of explainability. Do a lot of these new models do a better job of explaining why some of these AIs are making either the decisions or telling you why something is the way it is versus what was, happening earlier?
So this, I expect to get better in the coming year, and it needs to get better. This is probably not surprisingly like the last thought. So the idea is we're going to get an AI to do something, and it's going to do it, and we're going to be impressed by it. And then we're going to think about how to use AI to explain what it's done, because that's what's going to be required for adoption, or a reason for the user to believe that they should trust AI.
Right.
Yeah, so that you'll see more products coming out, and really 2025 I would describe as a year of more application layer introduction, and you'll see more things related to explainability. I think it also connects to safety and trust and that family of technologies.
Right. I think in the agent example that we've been using a lot on this show, it's more about like, hey, I tell the agent, okay, I want to book a trip to Florida and go off and do it. And then it comes back and says, well, here are the 3 flights that I have, and then let me pick it. But then I want to know, like, why did you pick these 3 flights? And at that point, I don't know if it would tell me like, well, because, based on your past history, you like window seats versus aisle, or you like early flights versus late, or, I'm trying to save you some money. Like that's the type of explainability I think people would want with agents in the future, right? Or is there something else that people would want?
I think that's required for minimum viability, and in a marketplace where we imagine agents interacting with one another. So you have an agent that's working on your behalf, but it's also interacting with agents in a marketplace that are putting out the offers for, say, ticket price and rental vehicle and other attractions.
Right, and there would be less trust for me if I felt like my agent was just taking advantage of an offer that was offered up by a separate agent without any reasoning behind it, versus like, for my preference, like, how do I know that these offers are the best offers? it has to trust another agent that those are the best offers, or and then it goes into this weird rabbit hole of machines and whether they're trusting other machines.
Yeah. So you need explainability, but you also need a ledger that documents what actually happened, right? That's what the ultimate source of trust is that you have like real data and you can follow it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and then once I think, do you think that there will be like a tipping point where there's enough explainability that people will trust it and then that goes away, or will the explainability always be in the background?
It'll always need to be there, but people will trust it more, right? They won't do that check-in. But in general, it'll depend on the risk around the use case.
Right. Okay. Good point. Now, you also mentioned AWS earlier. You just went to the AWS reInvent. Is it invent or reinvent? It's reInvent. And this was last month in December. What did anything jump out at you from the announcements? Because I looked really quickly at some of the announcements, and it felt like a lot of these companies, especially AWS and Amazon, are they continue to tout new models and faster models and more processors and all these other partnerships. But was there something underneath maybe that you saw at the show around the world of agentic AI or other parts of generative AI?
Specifically, I'll call out Code Interpreter. It's called. But
okay.
I don't think the name does it justice. It generally, as a developer or somebody trying to produce a user interface, it creates a more attractive experience that mixes the modalities of what Gen AI can produce in a very easy way. So if you want to produce an interactive output for a user that has video and text and audio, that Code Interpreter product that they've been developing, and I don't think it's quite released yet, but I think this quarter is a really effective instrument to interact with their other products to make it really easy for developers to create that Gen AI integrated experience.
Okay. Anything else that sparked your interest from that show?
I just think this idea, this is more on like the business model sort of side. We've been pricing things out and charging people in SaaS models that might have multiple tiers, that might be based on the entire amount of data or the perceived value that's delivered. You'll see more business models, I think, that align with the idea of the tokens or the amount of information that one gets, because the value should be proportional to those tokens, say, versus the number of data feeds or the size of data that you have somewhere. I think that'll be an interesting and quick paradigm shift that'll begin as businesses think about monetizing the use of Gen AI and getting compensated for it.
Another trend that we were hearing was that this is the year where people are going to kind of get away from the pilot project phase and really get into some serious production, whether that's internal use or external. Do you feel that way as well, or is it more we're just going to see everyone doing something with AI, whether they were the early adopters or now everyone is going to have to do something at this point? Is it too late to be on the fence?
This is the last moment, and the specific way this will play out is like companies that figure out how to change the way that they do what they do, not necessarily stray from what their brand promises, but that they can do it in a much more efficient way and produce a better output because AI allows them to systematically shift. They'll break away from their competitors, right? And it'll be hard to catch up after this year. So as more as this application layer stuff is built, the companies that figure out how to say, hey, I don't need these 5 different roles. I can have one person do all of those things because, say, they can interact in plain language.
Yeah.
And they actually institute that change management in their organizations. Like, that's where the real value is going to be. And the quicker you can actually do that at scale, get out of the concept or greenfield sort of space and push that across your entire business, that's where we'll see breakout firms.
Are there certain industries where you're seeing those industries take a leading role in the world of AI agents, versus other industries that might be a little slow to adopt? Call centers.
I mentioned call centers. So, I've seen some stuff from like company C1 that specializes in this sort of call center AI. Um, in the last quarter, and maybe you've experienced this in your own call center experience, you've seen a better structure around a tiered system where the entry point is a Gen AI, an audio-based experience, telephonic. You call in and you start talking to somebody, and you don't realize it's an AI. Right. So I've been in rooms where I'm watching people that sort of know the context of the conversation and are just amazed by what they're hearing and what they're experiencing in an AI-based conversation. It's able to mirror the cultural aspects of a particular caller, the cadence in their speech, the tone in their voice, whether they're frustrated, all of those sort of things. And the metrics are coming in that used to be it would go from that all automated tier up to the offshore call center tier to the premium customer service tier. And the amount of flow through from the first level to the second level has just completely shifted in the last couple of months. For that particular company.
In my experience, I'm still stuck with the chatbots, the automated chatbots, and I keep trying to get to a human, and then I usually get to that offshore one, and then whether I get success or not, it depends on if they understand my problem. I'm still waiting, but maybe I'm just not, dealing with the right companies for this, because it still feels like I'm still in that old world and I haven't seen this new experience.
Have just started to institute this, the diffusion curve. Like there's people that try this stuff early and starting to see greater success. In the last couple of months. Okay.
What about in the financial world? Are you seeing this too? Or, are they adopting it? Retail? Legal? I mean, I think legal is always slow to adopt some of these things.
They are.
Yeah.
What sort of productivity increases that they're getting? I think very quickly they got to that 15 to 25% level, where very quickly you could mint a draft of just about any legal document that does that well.
And,
can get something to a more senior legal staff member. Like a lot of the stuff, the pool of legal assistants and first year sort of associates and stuff like that. There's less of a need for that. I think that's signified in, the sort of job postings. The amount of job postings have decreased. I don't have the metrics, but that's one place. And I'm definitely more familiar with software development, where we have seen a drop in the number of job postings there, just because of the ability of the stuff to write code or that first draft of code. You don't need that junior developer to.
Right. That's causing other issues in the whole job hunting space and in the IT job hiring market as well. We've done some shows around that too. All right. So, beyond AI agents and things like that, are there other technologies they're still within the AI space, but what should businesses be monitoring so that they don't all just put all of their eggs into this AI agents basket? What else should they be looking at? And in my notes, I just wrote down multimodal AI and then time inference. Can you explain some of those concepts?
Yeah. So there's two. Those are both AI ones.
Yeah.
So if you think about dimensions for scale, improvement of AI, time compute will give you a better answer, because it's effectively validating, or it's called functional verification specifically, of what the AI is generating before it puts out the answer. And when it does that, you get a much better answer. So that's a dimension for scale and improving things, especially as we have more hardware to back that up. Then you mentioned multimodality. So the idea that as inputs, it's not just language. Like we went and scraped the internet for a bunch of language and other things and trained these models. There's still a lot of data that exists in images and videos that we're getting better at scraping or taking and using to train the models, and being able to train models that not only as outputs have multimodality, but inputs they're using, say, gene sequence with language, with numerical data, and it can take all of that. So that's certainly a dimension of scale. And then the final one is like, well, we've used all the data. Even if you believe that that there aren't any more data resources left on the planet, because of this functional verification, you can actually produce useful data that's informative, and that's going on in the training. And there's been a lot of advances in scaling that up. And then really the limitation is human innovation. Like we'll continue to be innovative, and the resources expand with those sort of innovative avenues. And, that's why you continue to see major investments in the hardware as well as the general models, because there's lots of room for opportunities.
Do you think that the challenges around AI agents are they the same kind of challenges that we saw earlier with generative AI, with the ChatGPT worlds, where you talk about hallucinations and things like that, or are there different challenges? Like if a company is ready to move into this agentic AI space, what challenges should they be aware of, or potential obstacles that they might not have seen before, or are they the same basically?
So it's sort of an answer to that, right? If you narrow the scope of what a AI is responsible for, then you are narrowing the scope of possible hallucination, right? The hallucinations make these broad connections, but if you narrow the frame, it reduces that. And in general, we've heard less about hallucination, and hallucination has also been used to make AI more creative, just like we as humans fundamentally hallucinate and are great ideas. But the difficult thing right now is getting to an application layer that's doesn't require experienced engineers or smart people that are just figuring out how to use these things. Like, all right, now we have frameworks for putting together agentic solutions. Like, we don't know how to do it. We actually have to try a little bit and see how that happens. And I think you'll see a lot of test and learn in that respect. Again, the focus will be in these lower risk applications. You asked about, like, what about financial services? Well, you can imagine a bunch of potential applications in financial services that will have to come later, just because the risk around that stuff.
So when you look at the year ahead, or at least the next couple of years, what gets you energized? Is it agentic AI, or is it something else? Like what are you most excited about for the coming year?
I don't think a lot about this generalized intelligence thing that we hear Sam Altman talking about, but I am excited about advancements in agentic AI, because they'll allow for a large expansion of new products in the application layer that will affect us as business users, and then ultimately affect end consumers. That's going to happen. There's going to be, I think, new injection of capital that's coming, mergers that'll allow for more innovation and bringing solutions to market. And then another thing that I'm always thinking about, and I'm just surprised that we don't see more traction on, and relates to your other question about technologies that aren't necessarily AI but interact with it, it's blockchain. Right, and I alluded to that earlier when I suggested that. I
did notice. I didn't want to take the bait on that, Mike.
But that's certainly having an immutable ledger. It marries very well with the idea of, like, you have data. Data is a very important and valuable asset. You have the models, the fundamental models, or your specific renditions on them, and then you have the compute resource, and all of those ideas fit very nicely into being able to transact on a ledger, and then having a natural sort of currency connection to it that allows one to trade, and it really decentralizes that and democratizes access.
All right. At least you didn't mention quantum computing, but that could be in the back of your head as well. No, that's another. Well, okay. All right. Sounds thank you. Cool. Oh, thank goodness. Yeah. All right, Michael Cohen. Again, thanks again for giving us this great overview of AI agents, and again, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today's episode. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.